On today's show, we are shipping up to Boston. We'll talk about that and more on today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. That includes YouTube. Please subscribe and all of that on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice if you have not already.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
All right, the music you heard on the way in is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Apple Music or Spotify. I'm Chris Manning. I cover the Cavs and NBA at large for places like UPROXX and Estimations for the Sword. That man over there is Evan Dammarell. He is at Down Euclid as well as fearthesword.com. Evan, before we get into today's show, which we're going to talk about Cleveland Charge Media Day. I almost said it. I was going to have to put $1 in our fictional jar. We're talking about that media day, which you attended with Fear the Sword colleague Jackson Flickinger. Second segment, we're going to look ahead to Cavs Celtics intrigue. And then the third segment, John Corrales from Locked On Celtics and I are going to talk about Jayson Tatum, because I think if you haven't watched much of him this year, he's been pretty freaking good. But Evan, before we do that, I made my lead into the show today, my cold open as it were, said the Cavs are shipping up to Boston. What band, sir, is that a reference to?
To Dropkick Murphys.
Yes, good. I was gonna have to
It's a pretty commonly known song, I feel.
Here's the thing: I'm married to someone whose music taste is bad and who doesn't know, who constantly will be unsure of things.
Bro,
I
her students are
check.
gonna dry snitch on you so hard now that you said that.
That's okay. They're 8th graders. Listen,
don't dry snitch. No one likes a dry snitcher because snitches don't get anything because this is a virtual podcast.
I will tell you off air what a kid in her class did yesterday, and that'll be that. But let's talk about Charge Media Day first, Evan. You were there with Jackson Flickinger.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, what is Mike Garrity's the new head coach? Isaiah Mobley's there. Cavs Twitter's favorite player, Mamadi Diakite, is there. What to you is the overarching theme, if there is one, from Charge Media Day?
That it's a little bit of the same expectations as last year, where I asked Brendan Yu about this, earlier this year, maybe in January or so. Yeah, I did the interview in my car. I was freezing cold out, so it was January for sure. And is where I asked him 10 times out of 10, if they had to choose between winning or developing a depth piece for the Cavs, they're going to choose the depth piece. And now they kind of have a little bit of extra oomph there. They have Mamadi Diakite, they have Isaiah Mobley. At least with Mobley, for sure, he's going to be probably expected to become a depth piece for the Charge. Mm-hmm. Sorry, not the Charge, the Cavs, just because, one, he's Evan Mobley's older brother, and two, he does have some intriguing upside where he can slot in as that backup 4 or 5, possibly next year, or maybe later this season as well, if he's able just to kind of pop with the Charge early on into things. And it's more so now they're trying to build an ecosystem to support Mike Garrity. I kind of have been poking around just between players who we know, Dan Giroux and Mike Garrity, and just Brendan Yu and just people in the Charge and people with the Cavs. What's the difference between the two? And just Dan's more of a laid back guy. He's more so works with the process. He told me his advice to Mike was breathe and take it day by day and be patient with the process. And because the G League is just such a uncertain commodity some days, because you don't know what your roster could be if the pandemic just hits the NBA really hard and you see a bunch of your core guys get scooped up by clubs to fill out their depth charts, and you're kind of just adjusting on the fly with it and working with it. But it's just more Garrity's more of just trying to be more of not a regimented coach. He is a player's coach at the end of the day. He listens to his guys and works with them, and doesn't try to be inauthentic, and he's trying to be himself, because that's the one thing that stood out to me about Garrity, and he reaffirmed what JV Bickerstaff said, where these guys are grown men, they're professional athletes, they can smell BS a mile away.
Yes.
And I asked Chandler Vaudrin about that. I said, do you agree with that sentiment? And what's your impression of Mike so far? And he's just yeah, you can tell some coaches they're really trying to win you over and convince you that they're the head guy, they're in charge, they're understanding things. And he's Mike is obviously learning, and he's kind of growing on the fly here and just taking it day by day as he shifts from being an assistant coach to a head coach, which is a different thing. And you can tell that he's but he does have the respect of the locker room. He does have the attention of the guys in there, and like guys are listening to what he's trying to do, which is try and make a version of like the Cavs light, maybe, where they mimic a lot of the things the Cavs try to do, whether it's like Sharif Cooper trying to do similar things ball handling wise as Darius Garland, or they're using Isaiah Mobley similarly to his brother, or they're kind of asking Mamadi Diakite to defend in space more and be more of a multifaceted big man who can shoot instead of just like a traditional five who is just hyper athletic. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff they're doing. It's just now you got to see it in execution, obviously, and over the coming days and their home openers in a few weeks or so, and we'll see how they look then. But it's an interesting disposition, and Mike Garrity really is the tone setter. And it just to circle back to your question, it feels like the same charge with maybe like a little bit of heightened expectations, where they didn't have a great record last season. They owned up to it across the board, and they're trying to get more in the win column as they continue to produce rotational pieces for not just the Cavs, but for any team in the NBA, because another quote from Brendan Yu that sticks with me is when they develop rotation players, that's a win for them because they have success stories, and their key ones right now are Dean Wade and Lamar Stevens with the Cavs, but like Kyle Guy got minutes. Quinn Cook was a piece on the Golden State Warriors and has bounced around the league a little bit too. And I don't think he's I know he's with the Kings now. So
yes, maybe he got cut, but he was at least in camp with them. I'm not sure.
Okay, so either way, like they have some interesting guys at least, and they had the first pick of the draft and Sam Merrill on the roster now too. So like they have pieces in place to kind of develop some quality NBA talent, I think, compared to last year where it was really like a constant flushing of talent at times.
I find Garrity I think Garrity makes like a lot of sense in this role, just because like his whole thing is player development.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of getting Isaiah Mobley, and I think the guy I'm most interested on that roster. And then you go to, Diakite and, Sharif Cooper, who I know the Cavs liked when he came out. And some of the other guys, like Vaudrin is someone that like they've had around for a while in a different ways now.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by just like the fact they put a guy whose whole thing is player development chops at the head of this team. That makes sense to me. And like,
yeah,
they will obviously want to win games. It does not matter to me or if I'm the Cavs that much if they're going to win, if that team wins a lot of games. You're trying to just see development. You're trying to see how things progress. You're trying to just see how things function within that team, within that group. And Garrity just makes sense as a guy to do some of that if you're trying to just develop guys. And look, we'll see how this goes. Like, we'll see how much Isaiah Mobley gets down there. I think it'd make a ton of sense for him to just spend the whole year down there if he possibly can. Like, that to me makes just a lot of sense.
And Jackson Flickinger asked Brendan Yu a good question of like, what are ways for fans or just folks covering this team? Because the G League is a different monster than the NBA, where sometimes success isn't necessarily quantified just in wins and losses. And a lot of the players said like, well, winning is the best way to quantify. But like when he asked Brendan Yu, he used Isaiah Mobley as an example. He's like, yeah, like we could see him put up like 10 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block in a game, similar to his brother. But is he able to close out in space, or is he able to defend in isolation? Well, like we're going to be watching that a little bit more closely. Like he didn't pull back the curtain too much on what the Chargers are looking for. Some of the guys are really like committed to like really making a concerted effort in developing, but there's certain aspects they're just kind of monitoring. Like Sam Merrill, like is he healthy after having a little bit of an injury, being banged up last season and shut down with the Grizzlies when he was with the Memphis Hustle and just kind of lost the season to that. Like, is he healthy, but is he able to become a shooter? Because he's Brendan Yu specifically highlighted like Isaiah Mobley, Mamadi Diakite, Sam Merrill as just like guys who could be NBA quality players sooner instead of later as compared to some of the other guys on the roster. And he says like, yeah, there's just certain metrics we're kind of keeping track of to say like, okay, we can focus on this aspect of development, and if they're achieving in this, maybe we can shift our focus to something else to kind of make them more of the ideal player that the Cavs could use at the back end of the rotation.
Yeah, I think that's like the exact way to put it. Like they have guys that I am intrigued by, right? Like I think Vaudrin can really shoot it in a lot of ways.
Vaudrin intrigues the heck out of me because he's a 6'7", 6'8" point guard, and it's the mold of like what JD would kind of like at any position, just like a playmaking wing. And if he can shoot. That's an immediate step over RJ Nembhard. It's just, again, you got to see where he's at health-wise, too.
Yeah, and the Cavs have to hit on some of this stuff. We will say this over and over and over and over and over again. The Cleveland Cavaliers are in a spot and at a point in their development stage with Donovan Mitchell and that escalating things where it's you have to start hitting on some of this stuff. You have to really.
Financially, you're gonna be cash strapped soon, and you gotta fill out the back end of your rotation with cheap, high quality talent.
Yeah, this has to get figured out. This has to get organized and play together and all that stuff. But we'll talk about them more as the season goes on, provide you some intermittent updates on the charge. But Evan, first, let's go into a break. We'll come back. We'll look ahead to Cavs Celtics, what intrigues us about that game. But first, you are going to tell everyone about our friends at PrizePicks.
Today's episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by PrizePicks. To play, pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There is no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sports you watch. This includes NBA, NFL, MLB, PGA, men's college hoops, women's college hoops, soccer, esports, NASCAR, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Eurobasket, cricket. You name it, they probably cover it. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, and they also offer safe and fast withdrawals. They are currently operational in over 30 states and Canada, and if you download PrizePicks on the app or the PrizePicks.com to sign up today, you can play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit, and they can get a match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. And don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 dues. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON, like the network or the first 2 words of this podcast.
Or if on YouTube, like the thing on my hat. Locked On.
It's just a shame we weren't nominated for a streamy. Really hurt about that still.
I'm not. All right, we're back. Chris Manning here, Evan Dammarell. Evan, what intrigues you about Cavs Celtics? Celtics obviously make the finals last year. This is a very good basketball team. So when you think about this, when you look at what's going on here, what most are you looking forward to about this game?
I think this is really there's no Darius Garland in this game, so that's obviously a bit of a blow for the Cavs. I think with that high res image of Garland at yesterday's shoot around, you can see his eyes still pretty swollen. Maybe he won't play Sunday against the Knicks, and if the Cavs are able to win, that's great. And if they can keep on winning, that's great. But I think this is the first true test of kind of where this Cavs team can stand up with 3/4 of their their core 4 rather, and kind of just see where they stand in the grand scheme of the Eastern Conference too, because the Celtics are pretty good. They, like you said, they're the defending Eastern Conference champs, so there's a little bit of you need to come up to that game, you need to show up, and obviously they're in Boston, which is a hostile environment, a tough place to win and play in as well. I would probably see them kind of take a pretty big sucker punch from the Celtics, and we'll see how they recover from it, because Jayson Tatum's lethal, Jaylen Brown's lethal, Marcus Smart against Donovan Mitchell's going to be intriguing. Is Isaac Okoro going to be used a little bit more for perimeter defense, and maybe you kind of ignore his offensive deficiencies? And I have one thing I'm really going to be keeping an eye on, but I'm going to pass the rock to you. And what are you kind of looking at with this Friday night tilt?
It's for one, it's the Tatum part of it. He's just, I think, playing at an unreal level this year. This is a team. He looks just better than last year. And he's the head of a really good offense. The Celtics right now were 3rd in the league in offense at they're scoring 119.6 points per 100 possessions. That's 7.5 points better than the league average right now, according to Cleaning Glass. The Cavs, meanwhile, are 8th, but the Cavs have the second best defense in the league going as of right now, giving at 103.9 defensive rating. That's about 9 points better than the league average. So these are 2 teams with opposing strengths that are going to be going head-to-head, and the Cavs come into this game with the best point differential of the league. They're plus 10.9 in point differential right now, which is pretty good. Celtics are 14th, but Boston, they're both 3-1. This is a game where it's on the road. It's kind of they'll play again next week. There's that tightness of it. There's intrigue to me just on that front, and just how the Cavs defense, which has been good so far, how they do against a team that I think has the personnel in Tatum foremost, but also Brown, to really hit them, I think is going to be intriguing. And we should note, addition on the Cavs side, obviously Darius Garland out. Grant Williams will be out for this game due to suspension, so that takes away a key three-point outlet for the Celtics. Does that crack the door open for Cleveland enough to maybe make them easier to defend? What does that look like? How does it impact the game? I think it will help Cleveland in some way if you're getting like Blake Griffin minutes in 2022 versus Grant Williams minutes or whatever that looks like. But I think this is just a good test for the Cavs as we understand them now. Obviously, they aren't at full strength because no Garland, but this is the team that made the finals last year. They're both 3-1. They have a really high-powered offense. How does a Cavs team built on defense do going on the road in I think what will be like feel like a bigger game than maybe even the Toronto opening night game did?
Well, first off, how remiss of you not to mention that this is the Luke Cornett reunion game against the Cavs. But what I'm really looking ahead to here is in their game against Chicago, which is when Boston last played on Monday. So I think Boston maybe they have a little bit of rust because that's quite a long time off in between games going from Monday to Friday to play. But Nikola Vucevic had 10 offensive rebounds and 13 defensive rebounds for 23 total boards, and Andre Drummond had 2 offensive boards and 10 defensive rebounds for 12 total offensive rebounds if you're doing math. And that is 10 less than the Celtics had total in that game. And if you have the Cavs with Jared Allen, who had a phenomenal game on the boards against the Magic, and you have Evan Mobley, who's still kind of finding his way but can be a pretty solid rebounder, and a guy like Donovan Mitchell, who is opportunistic and grabbing rebounds and kind of going ahead in the fast break, maybe this is the way the Cavs kind of win this game a little bit, because Al Horford's not the greatest rebounder. They are missing Time Lord right now, who kind of like answers a lot of those issues. I think having no Grant Williams is going to kind of impact that as well. Maybe Blake Griffin kind of has some gas in the tank, but I doubt it. So I think it's really going to be like a battle of the glass. If the Cavs want to impose their will, I think it's just getting a lot of second chance opportunities. And shoot, having 2 all-star caliber big men in your starting lineup certainly makes your case a lot easier when you're going into an environment where you're probably not expected to win against Boston, and you're probably going to have any advantage you can find, and that's going to probably be a key advantage in this game.
You can color me skeptical that Blake Griffin in 2022 is gonna.
I said that mostly in jest, like.
Yeah, I'm just for the people will be like, oh, Blake Griffin, and obviously like a legend in a lot of ways, but color me skeptical. So the Celtics coming into this game on the rebounding note are, let me pull this up real quick, are 18th, or excuse me, not 18th. They are 18th or 19th in defensive rebounding rate, so like towards the bottom of the league. The Cavs on the other end, on the offensive glass, are the 12th best offensive rebounding team, and they are just a little above league average in that right now. So yeah, this is a game where like you'd like to see Evan Mobley like have to do a lot defensively perhaps, but this is also a game where like Evan Mobley, let's play big. Let's have you just go ham and see what that looks like.
Yeah, this is another good game where Dean Wade, it makes sense as the starting 3, just more so the fact that he provides shooting and Isaac Okoro doesn't. But like if you want to play big, and heck, maybe we see more of like Evan Mobley crashing the glass and then he initiates those fast break sequences like you saw with that pass to Kevin Love, and you see a little bit more of that. There's some interesting wrinkles the Cavs could kind of utilize. I am curious to see like tactically how JB runs his lineups. Maybe do we see more Hollow Neto minutes in this game like we did against Orlando, or do we see Robin Lopez maybe get a little bit more burn just because that's another big body you can put out there, just so you're not like gassing out Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and possibly Dean Wade as well. Like there's a lot of interesting tactical things you can work through on the margins with the Cavs, and there's a way for them to win this game. It's just, I think, like you said, playing big and then kind of maybe playing to the fact that the Celtics are banged up without Grant Williams, and they can kind of take advantage of. Yeah, Al Horford's still a great player. Like, he just turns back the clock when he's back with Boston compared to his time with Philly, but which is wild because I thought that contract was doo-doo when it went there. But
the season, the sabbatical in Oklahoma City certainly helped.
As it does for, say, Gilgeous-Alexander when he goes to Toronto. But either way, there's a way for the Cavs to win this game, and I do think, like you said, it's them playing big and really just forcing a lot of pressure on the interior. And maybe it's just one of those games where you like try your best to defend Jayson Tatum, like you saw Jared Allen defending Kyle Kuzma. It's like an instance of that where like you play him hard on defense, But if he's killing you shot for shot wise, like it's not going to be a contest where like you have to match the Celtics shot for shot, because I don't think they're going to win it that way. Like you kind of have to find a way to grind it out and muck it up a little bit, and then maybe you just get Donovan Mitchell a little bit more comfortable and a little less helter-skelter out there to kind of make things a little easier for you.
Yeah, you're particularly not winning this in a shootout without Garland, so I think that's a very astute point. And then this, before we get to John, Evan, do you see any reason to go back to Okoro in the starting lineup? I don't
No.
think there's a case for it based on what we saw the other night.
No, I don't think so. I think we kind of touched on this a little bit. Even when Darius comes back, I think you see Okoro lose more minutes, especially if Jetty just kind of, like you mentioned at the top, a friend of the program, if you're the sword colleague, Jackson Flickinger pointed out, like Jetty had a great game against Orlando and didn't shoot the ball well from the perimeter. So if you get positive offensive production, you give more minutes to Jetty. You give more minutes to Dean. You find minutes for maybe guys who can make an impact. And if Isaac's able to kind of defend Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown really well, and if he ends up being like the difference maker, and it's not kind of like where Paolo Banchero sags off him and just disrespects Okoro like that, yeah, maybe. But yeah, for now, you stick Dean Wade in the starting lineup. You play big, and you just kind of get that shooting depth because it just works with Mitchell and like spread pick and rolls and lineups too.
I will say that this is one of those games where I'm the Jetty Osman test case of like how real this hot start from has been, and him playing, solidly in defense for the most part and things. This is one of those games like you're going to see how that looks against a team that could really hunt him in some ways. Mm-hmm. I will say that is one of the things I'd really watch. All right, we'll end there. As of right now, we do not have a betting line on this game, but check out our sponsor BetOnline for that line when it comes out. Evan, you mentioned the Cornet. This is also the Mifandou Kaganbele game.
Well, that's technically true unless he's with the main road clause. Let's check the old injury report while we're wrapping this up.
Yeah, I'll vamp for a minute. We have John Krause coming in next. But yeah, this is the kind of team I think I'd like to see the Cavs also in a playoff context.
He's out, unfortunately. No former Clippers legend Mfiondu Kabengele, because no JD Davison either. Shame. Yeah. Sad.
Troubling. All right, we'll be back right after this break with John Corrales from Locked on Celtics. I'm going to talk to him about Jayson Tatum, and then Evan and I will be back on Monday. So until you hear me in a second, hear Evan on Monday, everyone, be well. All right, last segment of the day. John Corrales, Locked on Celtics, is with me. John, it's a pleasure. Very excited for Cavs Celtics. We're going to talk about Jayson Tatum because he has been sensational to start the year. So when I come to you, the Celtics expert, and say, okay, to inform my listeners about what Tatum's been up to, how good he's been this year, how would you describe Tatum's start to the 2022-23 season?
Brilliant. That's a word that would work for Jayson Tatum. I broke down some of the numbers in my regular job over at Boston Sports Journal, and I think one of the two numbers jump out at me when it comes to Tatum. It's his restricted area field goal percentage is up around 80%, which is Giannis territory, and his mid-range field goal percentage has been, it's so super small sample size, but he's been hitting his mid-range shots. I won't even bother with percentages. He's just been hitting them at a high clip, and if those two things are going to be kind of where he is this season, and even if he tails off a little bit, if he's just better in the mid-range and kind of deadly at the rim, then he's MVP level. This is kind of like that step. And, you hear him talk about his reaction to the loss in the finals and the things that he wanted to do, and he talks about getting stronger with the ball and finishing and being more aggressive. And they were talking about not hunting fouls, but taking angles to the rim that just naturally draw fouls. And a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about with him for years, he just kind of has figured out how to correct that stuff. And look, he's 24. So this is about the time you start to take that next step with that part of your game. So he's just been great attacking. I keep talking about him attacking the front of the rim, and that's he last season and prior to that, he would always kind of glide past the front of the rim and try to avoid contact. Now he's going through contact, and he's just been shooting. He's been a notoriously slow starter, and this year he's just shooting super, super well. And he's playing defense. So he's doing a little bit of everything. And it's way too early to talk about MVPs, but this is the type of performance where if it carries through, he's got a chance to be an MVP.
So what are teams trying to do to defend him? Like, what are the things that teams have tried so far in order to slow him down, limit maybe how clean his looks like? What are teams trying to do to negate what he's done so far?
Well, when he runs a pick and roll, which they haven't done as much. He'll get blitzed. They'll run a couple of guys at him. But the beauty of what the Celtics have been able to do for most of this, their 3-1 start, is move and not hold the ball. So they haven't been able to load up on him as much. They haven't been able to throw those double teams at him as much. And when he does get it, he gets off the ball and he's not just standing there. So teams haven't been able to do a ton other than try to, you can get some zone looks. The Celtics have always struggled against zone looks. Try to pack the paint a little bit and try to entice him and the rest of the Celtics to fall back in love with jumpers. And Tatum loves his jump shots, no doubt about it. And the rest of the Celtics love their jump shots too. So they'll throw some zone out there, but it's been tough. You haven't seen them do much to stop him. He'll make quick decisions. He'll cut. It's a shame that the Chicago game went the way it did, because in that first quarter when he scored 15 points, he was cutting to the basket like a fiend and getting easy buckets. And you're like, how do you defend that if you're worried about Jaylen Brown and these other guys? And then Tatum slips behind the defense. So he's just been taking advantage of good ball movement, and he hasn't done a lot of that ISO, allowing teams to stack up on him like they have in the past.
What I would expect from the Cavs side of things is, I think one thing they'll do is they'll switch Mobley and Allen on him off of screens. So maybe like the fact that Boston isn't running like a ton of pick and roll with him maybe makes it harder. But when the opportunity presents itself, I'm expecting Mobley or Allen to switch on him and take that on. And then from there, does he take jump shots against those guys? Does he try to attack and draw fouls? The other part of it is we have not seen the Cavs run as much zone as they had at times last year. They as far as I have tracked myself, they have not run this 3-2 zone look where Mobley's at the top of the key. Maybe this is a game you bring that out to let him roam and cover space and try to lock down some shooting. John, a couple quick things we'll hit before we wrap this up. What does the Grant Williams suspension do in terms of how Boston will function on both sides? For what is him not being on the floor and being replaced by like a Sam Hauser or whomever else that is impact what Boston are going to be able to do in this game?
Well, it takes away an automatic three-point shooter who can come back and play defense on the other end. Hauser is a better shooter than Grant, and he can get going very easily, but he's not a good defender yet. And some of his overreactions led to breakdowns in that Chicago game, and that limits his minutes. So it's tough to deal without Grant in that way, because Grant can hit that corner three and come back and defend a big. He can defend up, he can defend down. So that's going to be the biggest thing. You lose that floor space that you can depend on the other end. And when you have to go to the bench, you're just kind of hoping for a little bit more of a shootout, and hoping that Hauser can just get super hot if he's the guy. Or if it's Blake Griffin, hoping that he can not even get hot, just hit a shot or two if he's the guy. So you lose a bunch on both ends.
What has, just on a quick thought, what is it like, just the Blake Griffin experience been like? It's just, he is such a fascinating, to me at least, figure, just because he hits this high apex with the Clippers, and like everything else since has just been like a slower and slower decline. And he's like without a team until Gallo gets hurt, he goes to Boston. It's like, what has it been like seeing Blake Griffin at this stage in his career, and just in a very different role than maybe they? It's weird than his apex. It's just no longer the same guy anymore. Yeah,
it's weird. It's fun. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
He's very cordial. On the floor, he just hasn't done a whole lot. He's gonna grab grab a few rebounds. He doesn't really want to shoot a whole lot. But he'll grab the rebounds. He'll try to take a charge, and that's about it. That's about it. His, basically the Blake Griffin experience is him on the bench with the guys. Al Horford said last week that Grant became one of us very quickly. So he kind of ingratiated himself on the team pretty well, pretty fast. You see him on Instagram going to concerts and different things with the guys. So he's fitting in. He's not disruptive, which is good. And he gets what he's bringing. And I think he understands that once Rob is back, that his minutes go away and may never come back. And he's kind of good with that. So it's been fine. In any minutes that he's playing are kind of out of necessity, and anything positive that he gives, I think everybody's just willing to take it. And anything negative that happens, you just kind of understand, like, well, yeah, this is part of it.
Last thing, what has Malcolm Brogdon brought so far? 4 games all off the bench, playing 23 minutes a game, which would be a career low for him. It's a different role for him. Obviously, he had that interview where he said he picked the Celtics over going to Toronto. So what has Brogdon brought so far?
Aside from the Chicago game where he just didn't play well, the other games in preseason, he's just been fabulous, unbelievable off the bench, just running that second unit. And I've been talking about how the Celtics basically only need to play even in the first quarter, and you feel good about them having a 10 or 12 point halftime lead, and which is weird when you have starters with Tatum and Brown, but I've just been okay with get through, let the Celtics bench handle it. Now, obviously, without Grant, that takes away an option for Malcolm to pass to, but he's just been really good at keeping possessions alive, keeping dribble alive, waiting, being patient, and finding guys whenever an opportunity presents itself, but still getting to the rim when he needs to, hitting a few shots when he needs to. I'd like to see that shot get more consistent. I think that's kind of a thing, but that's been a thing. But he's been great. I think he's been a welcome addition off the bench because it just gives them another ball handler. You got Tatum, like I said before, he's out there cutting and getting easy baskets. Jalen's cutting. This team's been cutting a lot more, and I think it's because when you have a guy like Brogdon that you can throw out there, and Derek White and Marcus Smart, bunch of ball handlers on the perimeter, when you play those guys together, you don't need Tatum and Brown to handle the ball as much as they did last season. Now they become dangerous, and you see a lot of guard-to-guard screening, guard-to-wing screening. You talked about getting switching on the pick and rolls. You might not even get Mobley in a pick and roll because you might see Marcus Smart setting the pick for Jayson Tatum. You might see Malcolm Brogdon setting a pick for Jayson Tatum, and they kind of try to free those guys up that way and get some size advantages that way. So Brogdon has just been a really great addition.
Very excited for this game. Best team the Cavs have played all year, but it's always fun to see them go into Boston and see how that looks. I think this should be fun. And look, it's a good barometer of how the Cavs stack up so far. They're performing well. They're 3-1, but this is, by no offense to Toronto, but this is the best team they've played by a significant margin, I would say. I'm curious to see how they stack up. All right, check out Locked On Celtics. And again, if you need a great second listen today, go check out Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. This Locked On Cavs episode was produced by Jake Stevens. Evan and I will be back on Monday recapping Cavs Celtics and Cavs Knicks, a twofer for you on the weekend. Until then, I'm Chris. Thanks again to John. Everyone, be well.